God has been working this theme into me regarding forgiveness. And he's been raising frustration inside of me over the lack of information or the misinformation in so-called helping disciplines in so-called Christianity regarding forgiveness. And what I see consistently is that people are not actually doing their own work, but they go out and teach about these things. And that's part of the problem, is that they teach in superficial ways because there's no depth or actual wisdom in what they're sharing. Jesus told us what the Father requires if we're going to be able to help other people. He said that we take the plank out of our own eye so that we can help our brother to take the speck out of his. And even Paul shared with us that Jesus is held to that standard of needing to have gone through certain things in order to help us. He tells us that Jesus, who was tested in every way, is able to help us because of that, because he knows what it's like and he overcame sin. So he was able to do that. And now he's able to help us because he did that. That's the pattern that God has set up. You know, when I was going to graduate school, I remember that there was one particular person, very, very arrogant, who used to say things like, well, I don't have to be schizophrenic in order to help a schizophrenic. You have to have some life experience, or you don't have wisdom. You don't have wisdom because you read a book. You don't have wisdom because you have credentials behind your name. I can tell you that from personal experience. I can also tell you that from experience of having trained people with many credentials behind their names. Paul also said that if you're going to be given a trust in God's house, you have to prove worthy of that trust, which means in my personal lived experience of God's ministry over and over and over, is that God is going to build understanding in you through you receiving that first. You have to prove worthy. You have to prove that you are willing to do this work if you're going to go teach others how to do it. But see, that isn't the way that the world operates. The world operates off of the world's expertise, and then people just go in and suddenly they're an expert and they can tell you how to live your life. And I'm going to tell you something else from personal experience, that people who are in helping disciplines telling others how to live their lives are the very last people on this planet who should be telling anyone to do anything. They have a feigned sense of altruism that is totally self-seeking. It is self-idolatrous, it is self-glorifying, and not to mention the big elephant in the room, you're paying them to do that work with you. So it doesn't matter at the end of the day whether you get better or not, because that's their livelihood. And they will walk out of a session with you and pat themselves on the back for the great work they did and the great advice that they gave you, while you're actually drowning in quicksand. You need to know that. I am not even trying to pat myself on the back for this, but I am going to tell you the very honest truth. I am the only person I know who was in the field of mental health who, first of all, did my own work, the wrong work. I mean, I was in many years of therapy in 12 steps, but I am literally the only person I know. It's not that there aren't other people, but I'm the only person I know who actually did that work and actually cared to keep learning and trying to find healing. And I never did. I never found healing in any of the places that I went, whether it was 12 steps or any other support group or any other individual therapy or modality of therapy. I never found healing, ever. I got worse, not better. You know why? Because God has already told us that He's our healer. He's not going to give you healing in a field that speaks on the authority of the world and sets up idols. He's not going to give you healing when you're going in and idolizing another person. So today, what God was raising inside of me was this resentment towards this woman who was a professor of mine when I was in graduate school. I looked up to her. She had that sort of quintessential therapist facade. You know, the one that speaks like this and moves really slowly and listens to everything you say. You know what I'm talking about. By the way, that's never been me. I've always talked just like this to you, just like a human being to a human being. But I fell into that. And part of the reason I fell into it is because I was kept from my mother growing up. And so I had this perpetual compulsive need for a mother, one who would see me and know me and respond the way that you would to a child. I mean, you might respond to a child that way, but adults need to be spoken to like adults, and they need to learn and know that the onus is on them to now build that part of them that should have been developed in a healthy relationship between a parent and a child. But I didn't know this yet. And I falsely assumed that this woman had wisdom, that she was kind, that she was loving and altruistic, and she exploited me. I graduated, and during a most horrific time in my life, after our house had burned down and we were displaced, my father had committed suicide, my mother had been diagnosed with cancer, my daughter was graduating from high school, so this is an incredibly huge time for a parent and a child and a family to be transitioning, but we were in the midst of chaos. And this woman was going through a second doctorate, which, by the way, admits that the first one is insufficient. She was going through a second doctorate in psychoanalysis. And she knew that I would be loyal to her because I had done things that were very loyal to her. And so she solicited services to me, which, by the way, is completely against our code of ethics in the field of psychology. Like, you can't do that. You can't just go out and be like, hey, would you like me to be your therapist? You really need therapy. You can't do that. And in fact, you're not supposed to be having these dual relationships. But that's what she did. And so I ended up seeing her for a while because that was the requirement of her program. Even though it was making me worse, I was drowning in quicksand. She did not throw me a lifeline at all. And as much as I wanted to stop, and by the way, was going in 3 days a week to see this person, and I was getting worse, not better. And concurrently going to 12 steps, getting worse, not better. And when it came down to her writing up her dissertation, and by the way, just sending it to me, I realized what this woman actually thought of me, which never came up in conversation between us. And so what I realize today is that this was a, first of all, counterfeit Christian woman, an absolute hypocrite who required me to go in and be honest about everything that I thought and felt, but never did that with me. And you know what happens when you do that in relationship? You come up with a lot of assumptions about what's going on in the relationship because you're not being honest. And when you're doing that, you're not giving the other person an opportunity to change. And in a therapeutic relationship, by the way, the relationship is supposed to be used as part of the therapy. So you're supposed to be sharing with that person. But if she had been honest with me, she would have run the risk of me dropping out. So that should help you to understand where her motives and her allegiance were. Now that's enough information to give you sort of a background of where my resentment was coming from. It went much deeper, but I really felt and have felt that she exploited what she knew was the reality, that I was kept from my mother and that would factor into the relationship. And she exploited it. She knew that she would have my loyalty and that I would at least be there for the year that was required for her to complete her program. But here's what I realized as I'm doing the work, is that her motives don't actually matter to my ability to heal or my ability to forgive. And healing and forgiveness go hand in hand. So Jesus says that we have to forgive. And if you're actually doing the work to truly forgive, you're going to understand that there's a requirement for you to sort through your own feelings and to heal first before you're going to be able to forgive and truly pity people who walk in darkness and pray for their salvation. It won't go any other way. And so I feel that a lot of times when I'm talking about this stuff and I talk about the requirement for healing, that people are like, no, it doesn't directly spell that out in scripture so that I don't have to heal. How else do you do this? How else do you forgive? You just superficially decide that you're going to forgive them. And then what happens when it stirs up in your heart? You just stuff it down so it doesn't see the light of day. You think that is actual forgiveness? You think that's genuine forgiveness in your heart? No, the dirt and the filth is still there. You just stuffed it down deeper into the corners. And now it's just dried up and crusting itself on the corners of those walls of your heart. I'm sorry for the metaphor, but it's descriptive, isn't it? I mean, that's literally what's happening. The implication is you have to heal. So as I sat down to journal this out this morning, I've been paying attention concurrently to the things that God has been teaching me with regard to forgiveness. And the thing that he's been pointing out to me is it's not about that person's motives. Now, you still have to journal out how you feel. And so that's going to come out in your feelings. So don't restrain yourself. Don't censor yourself to be able to say what it is that you think and feel, because that is important to give voice to. I'm going to go ahead and read my journal entry to you because I think that it might be important just to give you a model of what it is that I was feeling and how it is that I'm expressing how I'm feeling and sorting through it. I said I looked up to her. I thought she had wisdom and kindness in her heart. I needed a mother with wisdom and love. My mom actually had better wisdom in some ways because she could live a simple life. It turned out that so-and-so, I'm not going to use her name, had no wisdom or love. She was self-glorifying, speaking on her own wisdom. I saw her become very worldly. She had a facade of kindness and meekness, but I actually feel that she was mocking me behind that facade, especially because she hypocritically never shared her true thoughts with me, but felt fine to dump them into that document. I feel hurt by the fact that I came back. Why did I even bother to come back and finish up with her after that? That's how deep my loyalty was to her, and she exploited it. She exploited me. She never extended any motherly wisdom. She watched me sink further into the quicksand of my grief and horror without so much as a rope to pull me out. She obviously had no sense or wisdom. She told me that she supported anything I did to enhance my spirituality, which is the wrong answer for a Christian to give. Okay, at the time I was reading Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer is not a good source of spiritual information. And a Christian person should never be telling you, oh, I support anything that you do. Oh, okay, so you support me going to a shaman, a psychic, because they say they're spiritual. You support me using crystals. You support me reading false Christianity. You support me going to pagans who call themselves Christians. I mean, what are we talking about here? That is the wrong answer to give someone, especially someone who you know looks up to you for spiritual information. Now, me saying that, you're going to see that I get to the place where I realize my own idolatry of her. And what I've been telling you is that your resentment or your pain is not really about that other person. It's about your own sin, your consequences of feeling certain things and holding on to certain feelings or holding on to certain pain is not about the other person. If your healing was contingent on somebody else's behavior, we would all really be in a bad situation. But that's not the way God has designed things. He gives you consequences for your behavior, for your sin, and you're going to see that I will get there. But it's not enough for me to just know that and then superimpose it over my pain. You have to write out your feelings. You have to sort through this stuff, or you're not going to be able to get to the other side. I also want to mention that when you get to the other side, you don't necessarily feel positively towards someone who has not repented. I don't feel positively towards this person, but I do feel pity now because I understand she has no clue what it is to be Christian. She has no clue what true healing is. She has no clue what a hypocrite she is. But I have been made to understand my own hypocrisy, the falsehood I once lived in. I have been made able to understand that, enabled to understand that by God's Holy Spirit. So I'm blessed. So I wrote, she had no wisdom or understanding. I'll not re-engage because she apparently still has no wisdom, unless, and I'm speaking to the Lord now. When I'm writing in my journal, I will shift and speak to, I'll do my own work, and then I will start speaking to God when I know that it's time to do that. Unless you tell me to rebuke her, I don't intend to ever speak with her again. It seems to me she's already shown me who she is. I feel humiliated by her patronizing behavior and being so naive to think she actually cared about me. She couldn't have cared about me. She saw me as an opportunity, just like every other figure in my life. I don't feel positively towards her whatsoever. I feel humiliated and hurt by her. I sacrificed a lot to be there for her. I don't know if she thought she was sacrificing, but she wasn't helping me, so I don't know how she could think that. There was literally no shepherding to you, Lord. I feel that if I were to tell her how I feel or rebuke her, I would be inviting more humiliation and patronizing. I don't want that. I don't consider her a sister in you. I consider her a pagan. I don't want anything to do with those people who call themselves Christian. They are worse than pagans. I never want to speak with any of them again. She has no wisdom. She is a hypocrite and doesn't even know it. I pity her. If it is your will to save her, so be it. I would pray for all to be saved, whom you have predestined to be saved. So I pray for her too. And I know that you will vindicate me and cause all who have harmed me to know what they've done. I've not been forsaken by you. I loathe the field that I was in, the self-idolatry, the feigned altruism, the arrogance of false wisdom. I hate it. I'm so relieved to have left. I did not see anyone but myself as seeking truth and really wanting to help. They did it for themselves. They didn't do it for anyone else. I feel angry about falsehood. I just want you, Lord. I just want you. Please make a way for me to live in truth. Make a way for me to never have to return to falsehood again. I pray for those in darkness and that they will be brought to the light in you. Father, please forgive me for practicing in this field and even thinking that I was helping and that this was the answer. I've devoted my life to giving true answers, but nobody wants them. Please make a way for me to be used by you and to actually help. Bring them low to hear the message and help me to know if there's something I need to do differently or be corrected on. I never should have gone to her or any of them. I never should have been in the field. My anger and resentment now give her too much credit. Still, I'm engaging in idolatry because she doesn't even know what she's doing. She's in darkness. I've given her too much credit. She has no clue. I need to pity her because I actually have been given truth and healing. Okay, do you see how once you give voice to the way that you feel, once you're able to put that down on paper, then internally there should be an inner parent that would have been developed from a good parent that you had, but now the onus is on you to develop that inner parent that is shepherding you to understanding things from the perspective that God sees, because God is not continuing to feed some resentment in my heart because of somebody else's behavior. It's because of my behavior. The reason this situation has continued to hurt me is because this is what I needed to acknowledge. I needed to acknowledge that you're still giving that woman power because you're still setting her up as someone who should have known better. Why should she have known better? She walks in darkness. She probably doesn't even know the half of what I experienced at her hands because she walks in darkness. She does not have wisdom, and I never should have placed myself in the hands of a person who was of the world. I never should have gone into a field or deferred to a field for my healing when God says that he's our healer. Now, I didn't know those things. I sinned in ignorance. But God says that we still receive a small lashing when we sin in ignorance, and if we sin with knowledge, we'll receive a large lashing. And so the reason why is because God wants me to know you cannot set up idols. And if you do, you're going to be handed over to them. You're going to be handed over to the spirit of idolatry, and it's going to hurt you. So there are a couple things that God is teaching me today as I'm doing this work. Number one, the pain that you feel is not because of somebody else's behavior. It might have been triggered by somebody else's behavior, but the way in which you respond to that is what is hurting you. That's what needs to be healed in God, because at the end of the day, any vindication is going to come from him. But he is raising this in you in order for you to be purified, made spotless, and refined. What is he purifying, making spotless, and refining in me? You cannot set up idols. And if you, years later, because it's been years since I saw this woman, if I, years later, am continuing to feel this, it means I'm giving her more power than she actually has. I don't have clarity. I don't have understanding according to God in this situation. My heart has not been changed to what his heart is. My heart is still leaning on my own understanding according to my flesh. But she should have done this and she should have known that. Maybe not. And so what if it's true? What if she did, do all of this with knowledge? Because there are sadistic people who will do things, evil, wicked things with knowledge. So what if they did? They walk in darkness. Whether they do it ignorantly, whether they're committing evil ignorantly or they're committing it with knowledge, they walk in darkness. Does this mean that I have to feel positively towards them? No. I don't feel positively towards them. I have been told in scripture to dust my feet from evil people. When God says love your enemy, it does not mean to re-engage with your enemy or to throw your value to swine, your pearls to swine. And by the way, before someone comments on here and tries to tell me that pearls means pearls of wisdom, how about look up pearls in the Bible and you let me know where that comes from. I'm not going to throw my value to swine. And I've been told that if people don't walk in truth, you don't have anything to do with them. So the first thing is I don't really need the motives of the other person. Me taking stock of their motives and taking their inventory and all of this other stuff, judging them. That is not going to help me. I do need to discern the fruit. But this is something that I think is really important for a lot of people to hear, because a lot of times our inclination when we feel hurt or outraged is to call someone and go relent that story. Go tell someone, do you know what this person just did? And it's in order to justify ourselves, because as long as we get that external validation, which is a dime a dozen in the world, people will validate you. I shared about something that happened yesterday. People would have validated me in that situation, but that's not the standard. The standard is God. So we feel inclined to do that, and then we wonder why we're still relenting that story 20 years later, because it still is bothering us. We haven't healed. Other people are entitled to be wrong. They're entitled to do wicked things. They have the right, and they can exercise that right. Your healing and your requirement to forgive is not contingent on that. Thank God. Dissecting the motives of another person, justifying yourself, that will prohibit you from healing. Your focus needs to be on giving voice and examining the feelings that you have, being able to give voice to those feelings that you have so that you can examine what's going on in your heart. As you listen to the narrative, the earlier narrative in my writing about how I'm thinking and feeling about this, you realize how much power I'm giving that person. And what that inherently means is that I'm still idolizing her. Maybe not in the same way that I did previously, where I thought, oh, she's, like a mother figure and this and that. She's motherly and kind. Not that way, because now the mask has come off. But I still think that this person has more power than she does. And actually, it's the opposite. She has no wisdom or understanding whatsoever. She doesn't even know that she's evil. I'm actually blessed in this situation. God has given me understanding, and I'm not seeing the situation with the correct lenses, with the correct perspective, that I have been blessed to be able to have even healed in Christ. A person who is not shepherding you back to God, but is shepherding you to themselves, is walking in darkness. They don't understand where true healing comes from because they have not healed. Where's the power? The power is in the person who's been enabled by the Spirit of God, because the only power there is God. And so that's part of the work that you're doing is you're journaling. Give free rein. Allow yourself to share what you're thinking and feeling in that particular situation. But then your inner parent, that inner parent part of you, needs to come along and shepherd you into the understanding of God. Don't stifle your feelings as you're doing that. You see that I continue to share my feelings all the way to the end. So you're not gonna, write your feelings out and then come in militantly and say, okay, now this is the way you need to think. That's not what I did. I gently shepherded that inner child who's hurt and tender and feels exploited and feels confused. I gently shepherded her feelings into the correct heart. And once that happened, I was able to take up with God, okay, what do you require of me? And how does this relate to what I'm currently going through? Because currently I have some answers and no one wants to hear them. And that's really kind of hard for me. And I pray for all of those whom you have chosen, whom you have predestined for salvation. And if she's one of those people, I most definitely want for her to receive salvation. And I know that you will vindicate. I know what you've done with me. I mean, you make me see the things I've done. Of course you're going to do that with other people. I am not harboring a resentment to the point that I would ever want anyone to be prohibited from salvation. What's in my heart is that I desire truth and accountability. And also, now that truth and accountability must be in me. But the absence of it in another person is not going to prohibit my ability to heal. I hope that this helps you guys. You got to put it into application. You're not going to be able to fully understand what I'm talking about unless you sit down and take whatever resentment is hurting your heart right now or God is bringing up. Take that situation and sit down and write about it and do what I said. Give voice to your own feelings. Be honest about the way you feel so that you can see what's in your heart. And then you can start shepherding yourself, that tender child in your heart. You can start shepherding them to where God requires you to be. Please discern this message with God.